I think one of the most awkwardest parts of dating or being in a relationship is meeting the family or telling your family that, hey, we're a thing and we're actually pretty serious. I think it's just so awkward, even if you've met the family before.
This is maybe just like a side tangent, not to do with anything that you're leading into, but I feel like talking to the parents and like being like, yeah, we're trying to have a kid. Yeah, we're working hard to make a kid. It's like, it's just so uncomfortable. Like, okay, you're telling your parents, like, yeah, we're really shaboinking something crazy.
Yeah, I know. I always find it so awkward when people tell me that because I'm like, oh, awesome. Wow, cool.
So legit. That's exactly what I needed to think of tonight.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
like, "Thank you." For Anna, this was something that she was really nervous about, was telling Derrick's family that her and Derrick were pretty close. They were wanting to move in together, and her and Derrick started talking about it, and they were like, "Yeah, this is gonna be good. We gotta go tell them." So when Anna would arrive at the Johnsons' house, she was met with smiles like every other time. So when she went into the kitchen and she kinda sat everyone down, she would turn to Derrick and say, "Should we tell them?" Derek's mother, Daisy, and his brother, John, were kind of confused. Tell us what? And that's when Anna would type out on this little device called Neo with Derek, typing out that they are in love. Now, this kind of shocked the family, not because Derek was black and Anna was white, and not because Anna was married with two children, but it probably was the fact that Derek was mentally disabled. He was unable to speak, right. He couldn't even walk. He was wearing a diaper, and he was described as having the mental capacity of a toddler. So they were really confused of how this would make sense. But for the past couple years, Anna had been helping Derek learn how to communicate, and she was telling the family Derek wasn't actually as mentally disabled as they thought. And so later that night, Anna actually thought things were going really well. She thought, oh, that went really great. I guess she just didn't read the room. She just didn't see the issue with it. And so later the next day in the morning, John would actually call Anna up and he would say, "Hey, I don't want you to see my brother until you talk with my mom and me about everything." And then one day, Anna would find herself in the parking lot of her work at the university where these two men came up to her, and she would later find out they were detectives. And they started asking her questions about Derek and everything, and she told them because she didn't think she did anything wrong. And then that's when she all of a sudden is being accused of rape. Welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. I'm your host, Jen. With me is Kira. In this podcast, we talk about all different sorts of things, such as true crime, mysteries, cults, or anything that we find interesting. Today, we are going to be talking about abuse, sexual abuse, ableism, racism, and microaggression. So, if any of that is maybe too close to home for you, or maybe is too much, or you're not in the right headspace for it, feel free to check out another episode of ours or take care of yourself, and we'll see you in another episode. All of the information is found online. I did look at and read a lot of articles, but I also did use the Netflix documentary, Tell Them You Love Me. And so, if anyone is more curious to learn a lot more about this case, I suggest watching the documentary. I did like the documentary because it did have the point of view of the family. So, I did want to take a lot of information from that and also from articles online. But of course, if I say anything wrong or if I leave anything out or you just want to correct me, you can leave in the comments below or if you just want to join in the conversation. So, who is Derrick Johnson? Derrick, at the time of this case, was 33 years old and he had extreme cerebral palsy. He was unable to speak. He couldn't stand independently. He couldn't really direct the movements of his body. And as a baby, he suffered from seizures. And at first, his mom, Daisy, she started to notice that he was acting a little bit different and he just wasn't behaving in the way that she felt was normal because she already had a son named John. So she kind of had been through this. So she actually brought Derek to the doctor, and the doctors kept telling Daisy that she was comparing him to John. Now, I do want to note this. This was probably in the very early 80s or maybe the late 70s. I don't know exactly when Derek was born, but Daisy was a single mom and she was a black mom. And for a lot of women, especially black women, they just don't get treated like they know anything, and a lot of times when it comes to doctors, they just are told that they're exaggerating, and I don't know if the doctors were black or if they were white or if they weren't listening to her because of her race, but it is important to note that, like, a lot of black women did go through this, and Daisy just wasn't getting listened to, and so she finally was like, "I need you guys to do tests on my son. There is something wrong with him." So eventually, they would finally do a bunch of tests on Derrick, and they would find out that he was diagnosed with nonverbal cerebral palsy. And this affected his motor skills. He was unable to speak, walk, and he couldn't take care of any of his basic needs. He would later be assessed by a doctor who said that Derrick had been the mental age of a toddler. He was unable to do any of the basic tasks that most preschool children could do. His comprehension was very limited. His attention span was very short. And so, because of this, Derrick's brother and his mom would become his primary caretakers and his legal guardians. Derrick would attend a day program that would help him learn how to walk. Although he was unable to speak, he still was able to show excitement or still have his way of communicating. So sometimes when he was anxious, he would rock or he would bite his hands or his fingers. When he listens to music, especially gospel music, because he really liked gospel music, he would dance and kind of sway. And John actually said, and I thought this was kind of cute, that when he would dance, he would do this little dance and he'd call it the Stevie Wonder dance. I think that's so adorable. So, from all my research, it seemed that Derrick was honestly just living his life and he had such a loving family. He would go to his day program, he would go to church, he loved going to the beach. He was really happy, he would smile a lot, he loved giving hugs, and his family overall, they just were so sweet and they just loved Derrick the way he was. John's relationship with his brother is honestly so precious, and I don't want to like infantilize Derrick, but it just seems like John just had such a sweet relationship with his brother. He always made sure to include Derrick in everything. John actually said in the documentary, at first, when he found out that he was going to have a little brother, he was kind of disappointed because he wanted a little sister. But the moment Derrick came home, he said that they just had an instant connection and they've been attached since. He just loved his brother. And although Derrick couldn't communicate, I think John was okay with that because they had their own way of communicating. But all this would kind of change when John would attend school at the University of Rutgers in New Jersey. While he was getting his PhD, he took a class on philosophy and disability studies, and his professor, Anna Stubblefield, had shown the class a video on facilitated communication where there was this young woman. Her name was Sue Robbins. She had autism with intellectual disability, but she began to become a scholar by using facilitated communication. And this kind of changed the way people would be able to communicate with those that had disabilities. So, facilitated communication, or FC, is supported typing. It involves a person with a disability to point to an object or a letter or pictures on a keyboard that is called the Neo device. It's basically like a little keyboard with an LED screen that helps people communicate. So basically, when someone is using FC, they will have someone called a facilitator. So this person will help guide a person's arm or their hand to help them communicate. So they'll kind of point at objects or letters, and this way they can write out sentences and stuff like that. This is not the same thing as like communication cards that a lot of people who might have autism or who are nonverbal use, but typically they don't want to like push the person to type it. They want to kind of have the person who is disabled to do it. So they don't want to like force them to type out something. But a lot of disability groups, such as the American Speech Language Association, and just a lot of agencies have basically said that FC is discredited. It has no scientific proof. And usually it's the facilitator who is the one doing the typing in a way. And it's just pretty invalid. But at the time of the case, it seemed to be, I don't know if it was like very popular, but it was still like used, I guess. And so when John had seen this documentary in class, he started to notice a lot of similarities between Sue and Derrick. So he went up to Anna and was like, "Hey, I'm kind of curious about this FC thing." Anna would agree with John that maybe they should try it out and see if Derek would like this. So Anna had been around the disability community all of her life. Her parents were major activists for women's rights, for the environment, and her mom worked with those with cognitive disabilities and the blind community. And her mom also used FC, so she was kind of used to this. Anna shared a lot of interest in those with disadvantages or disabilities. So she would go on to study Braille, she would learn sign language. She just had a huge heart for the underdog. And this was a little weird. When she was a kid, since she had such an interest in disabilities, she had her dad make her crutches so she could pretend to have polio. Now, I know children might want to, like, I don't know, ride on a wheelchair or use crutches to try it out. And I think that as a parent, you should probably be like, hey, this is someone's life. I don't think we should be like role playing as a disabled person. I just find that a little odd, but I mean, she's a kid, so okay.
Being specifically to be like, "Oh, I want polio." Like, that's so oddly specific. I wonder if anyone in her life had polio because, like, I know for me, when I had, like, my grandpa growing up, he had a wheelchair, and so, like, I would always be like, "Hey, grandpa, can I ride in your wheelchair?" And then I'd go around the house in his wheelchair because, the wheels go hecka fast, but that's so oddly specific.
Yeah, it's a little odd. I feel like if I were her parents, I'd probably be like, "Okay, if you wanna, like, try out the crutches, go for it, but, like, polio? Okay." So, Anna would go on to write a lot. She was very smart. She was an honor student, and in high school, she would write for the newspaper, which won a lot of awards. She would later become a scholar in the field of African politics, where she would actually go on to publish a lot of writings and articles about race and ethics, and she wanted to end white supremacy. So she would write a book called Ethics Along the Color Line, where she would just kind of go on about race and the disabilities and trying to dismantle white supremacy and stuff like that. But she did have a fear of being in spaces that were for Black people because she didn't want to take away their voice. She didn't want to have too much power, and she was just afraid that she was overstepping. She would actually go on to write, "White people all too often invade or destroy the space for non-white people," which is very true. A lot of times white people will try to be an ally and they end up just speaking over people of color or just speaking over voices that isn't for them. Interesting enough, the Black community actually really didn't like what she had to write, which I do find very interesting, and I think it'll kind of show up throughout this case. But the disabled community did like her writing, so she began to do a lot of her focus work around the disabled community. So she would go on to be hired as a philosophy professor at the Rutgers University, and she would also teach FC. So after she was talking with John, she would kind of mention to John that there was a school that Derek could go to, but it was kind of expensive and not everyone is able to use FC. Like sometimes it doesn't work. So she was like, "Why don't I just like help your brother and test it out?" And so she started to tell the Johnsons that she kind of believed that the doctors were wrong about Derek. She kind of suggested that a lot of IQ tests are not accurate because they're going to rely very heavy on reading and writing and verbal and all that. And sometimes people, they might be very mentally capable, but their physical body doesn't let them. So she kind of theorized that maybe Derek isn't actually as mentally disabled as everyone thinks he is. Maybe he's very smart. And John had shared about how sometimes when he would be reading a comic or he would just be reading, Derek would kind of hang over his shoulder and would want to read it too. And he said that he felt like there was more for Derek. Like Derek had something in there and he just was like curious about it. The family was like very interested in this FC thing. They were like, "Let's try it out. Let's see how it goes." Daisy was just so excited. She said that she was going to move mountains. They were ecstatic about this idea because this could change their lives. Because, you have to imagine if you had a family member that you had never been able to actually communicate with, and now you might be able to, this is crazy. And so Daisy would take Derek to the university to visit Anna every Saturday, and eventually Anna would do some of the training at Derek's home. So she would first start off by telling Derrick things like, I don't think you're stupid. I believe you're smart. Like, kind of giving him this positive reinforcement, trying to let him know, like, you know what? I believe that you're smart and please don't feel offended. And then she would start off by showing him photos of a sink, or she showed him a picture of Obama because this was back in 2008. So President Obama was the president, back when the US actually had a normal president. This was a way to test Derrick's recognition of patterns. So she would slowly have him by moving his arm to little letters on the keyboard, and it would start off by one letter to a sentence to full paragraphs. This was a game changer. So Anna was doing so well and Derrick was doing so well. She said that he was learning really fast. And so Daisy actually introduced Anna to a bunch of other mothers who had children with disabilities to teach them about FC, to be like, hey, maybe this is something that you guys would be interested in. Things started to get a little bit different when Anna kind of was like to Daisy, hey, you know what? I think it'd be better if you weren't in the room with Derrick because you're kind of distracting him. And I'm sure for Daisy, she's probably thinking, yeah, that's fine. Like, I'll just go do my own thing. Derrick apparently had asked Anna, hey, do you mind calling me D-Man? And obviously, Derrick was not speaking. Like, this is him typing it out. And this wasn't a shock to the family because Derrick had been called D-Man by his previous teacher. So they were like, oh, that makes total sense that he'd want to be called D-Man. So it didn't even seem like Anna was just like making stuff up. It was just like, oh, that makes sense. So Derrick was doing really, really well. He had a huge interest in reading and writing, and eventually he would take part in a 400 level African American literature course. Now, he wasn't taking a college course level, like he was auditing the class, if that kind of makes sense. But his teacher did say that he was able to identify the characters, the plot, all of that stuff. During this time, Anna was not in class with Derrick, but they did have another student who would help him kind of write and read and stuff like that. And so Derrick would go on to write a lot of essays, and he would write an essay with Anna for 6 weeks, where then John would read this to a crowd of people, and this was just changing their lives forever. Daisy was so excited for both of her sons because John was getting his PhD. He was almost done with it. I believe John was studying history, and John would go on to talk about how, he's going to become a Black scholar. And it was also more empowering because he was going to have a brother who was a Black disabled man who could become a scholar as well, because Derrick was in the way of getting his bachelor's. And so they said this just felt like a game changer. Like, everything's going to change the way it's going to go. And Derrick was becoming this trailblazer.
So, was Derek getting his degree before they met Anna or after?
After. So as he kind of started doing his like FC and he started writing, they were in the process of getting him to potentially get a bachelor. I don't even know exactly what he was going to get his bachelor in. I think it might have been African American literature, but he was kind of in the process of that. Anna was becoming very close to the family. John would actually call Anna like Aunt Anna. She would bake them pies. There was a time when Daisy was really sick, so she came and visited her, and she was just like part of the family. So Derrick would go on to do these like little conferences with the family and Anna, where Anna or John would share what Derrick had written. And one day they're going on this like little road trip, and Daisy's driving, she's playing her gospel music, and Anna just changes the station. And she's like, Derrick actually doesn't like gospel music. He likes classical music. Daisy was shocked because she was like, what? Like, that doesn't really make any sense. He's always liked gospel music. I don't think he's ever really liked classical music. We don't really listen to that. But she also was a little shocked and disrespected because, I mean, who just changes someone's radio? I mean, I know when I'm driving with someone, I'm not just changing their radio. Like, that's kind of crazy to me. Daisy would hit the radio back and just kind of like ignore it. She was like, whatever, like, that's kind of weird. But then Anna started putting up this like little wall. Now, this was over a course of 2 years. So there was one time when they were making chicken, and Anna was like, what are you doing? Derrick is a vegetarian. And Daisy was like, I didn't get the memo. What are you talking about? He's always liked chicken. I'm sure Derrick would have been able to show his family he didn't like chicken. Anna would be like, well, no, he told me this in the writing. And they were like, okay. And then there was a time when John had made a comment about wanting to drink beer with Derrick, and Anna was like, "No, he likes red wine." And John was like, "He doesn't even like communion wine. What are you talking about?" So this started to make John really question Anna because these preferences align a lot more with a white woman rather than a black man. And of course, John knows his brother. And so he's like, "My brother doesn't like those things. Like, you're just kind of lying. Like, this woman hasn't been in his life that long." So she started to really overstep her boundaries when she was telling Daisy how she was smothering Derrick and that she needed to step back and that Derrick wanted to move out. And this kind of broke Daisy down, making her feel like she wasn't that great of a mother. So Daisy would bring this up to John and say how Anna was saying that Derrick was wanting to move to this group home where he could live a little bit more independently and that there would be this organization that would provide him 24-hour care while he'd be able to get his degree and live a lot more like a man. Anna literally said to Daisy, "Daisy, you need to let him be a man." And John was like, "What the hell?" He was like to his mom, "Well, how much is this place going to cost? It's not going to be free." And he felt like Anna was beginning to really overstep her boundaries. I believe Anna was wanting to kind of get more of the guardianship over Derrick because I believe that she was trying to be like, "Oh, I can pay for this." I don't remember exactly if that is what she did do, but John did feel like this was a lot more racially charged though. Because, in the 80s and the 90s, even now and in the past, a lot of black women, especially if they were single moms, they were just treated like shit. They were treated like they were raising all these children and that they didn't know how to raise children, even though a lot of times it was probably due to the fact that these places where these black women were at were not getting the same privileges as, white families. But regardless, it feels like Anna was also trying to tell Daisy, like, she just didn't know how to take care of someone with a disability. And this was really insane because Daisy was affiliated with a lot of organizations that were all headed by women of color, specifically black women, that all advocated for people of color with disabilities. And, Derrick was in his 30s. Daisy had been taking care of him for the past 3 decades. This is her son. She probably knows what she's doing. I believe that she knew exactly what she was doing. And Anna hasn't even known Derrick that long. And she's trying to be like, "Oh, you don't know what you're doing. Girls, step back." So, another issue is that John was kind of noticing that the family would try to communicate with Derrick by using the little Neo device, but they just couldn't. John was only ever able to get like the word "the" out, but he just couldn't get anything out. So when he brought it up to Anna, she would say things like, "Oh, you just need to be a little bit more patient. You need to try a little bit harder." And then she would also say things like, "Oh, Derrick has a preference to work with me." Anna would say a lot of things that was kind of isolating the family, where she would share things like, "Oh, Derrick had said, 'I am confined in a body that is not able to move the way I would like.'" And this was kind of making the family feel, I don't know if they were feeling jealous or envious, but I feel like personally for me, if I had a sibling that couldn't speak and all of a sudden this woman came in my life and was like, "Oh, she's saying all these things, but I wasn't able to communicate," I probably would feel a little jealous or isolated. And this was the issue that the family was facing because it was like Derrick was telling Anna all of these things. Like, "I want to move out. I'm a vegetarian. Oh, here are these deep rooted feelings I'm having." But he isn't able to communicate any of this to the Johnsons. This felt like a huge cause of concern because it was like she was kind of isolating Derrick from his family. So this began to cause a major rift in the family, and John would actually look up the video that Anna had first shown when he was in class because he was like, "Maybe there's something I'm doing wrong." But as he started looking for this video, he came across a documentary that was called The Frontline. That was a documentary on facilitated communication and how people were beginning to become very suspicious. Facilitated communication was really popular in the 70s and the 80s. It began in the 1960s. I'm not going to go through like the history of it, but in the 90s, there was a lot of people claiming that they had been sexually abused by their facilitator. There was over 60 reports of this happening. And this makes sense because I mean, someone is already so close to you, but also a lot of these people are very vulnerable. They might not be able to, I mean, they can't say no, they can't really communicate. They might not be able to physically get away, and they're just so vulnerable. But these facilitators would be like, oh, no, no, no. We actually had consent because they consented through FC. There had been so many of these studies that were happening that were starting to debunk FC. And so there was this guy in this documentary. His name was Dr. Howard Shane. He had devoted his entire life to helping disabled nonverbal people communicate. And in the 90s, he would get a call from a prosecutor who was working on a case where someone had been assaulted while using facilitated communication. This prosecutor was asking Dr. Shane, hey, is FC actually reliable? And so Dr. Shane was like, I'm going to go do a test on this. So he would do a double blind test where he would show a series of pictures and he would ask them to type out what they saw. So he had this girl named Betsy and her facilitator, and he would show them a picture of a key and they would type out key. But when he would show Betsy a cup and the facilitator a hat, they would type out hat. He would redo this a couple of times to kind of make sure that it wasn't just a simple mistake. But every time he would do it, they would only type out what the facilitator was writing. So it kind of came to the conclusion that the facilitator was actually typing out what they saw. It could have been like subconsciously that they're doing it. Sometimes it's not malicious, but a lot of times it might have been. So basically, it's not really valid. It's not really able to be like they consented because the facilitator is really the one that has the control. So then this had John start to question and think about Derrick's writing because Derrick's writing was really all about, not really about Derrick. He would write things that were kind of like, now I have a voice rather than I was trapped and now I have freedom. And so he kind of felt like it was really odd the way he was writing and it just didn't seem right. So everything, though, would change on Memorial Day in 2011 when Anna would go to the Johnsons' house and she felt like this was the right time to tell them this big step in their life. So she would sit everyone down in the kitchen and she would turn to Derrick, and that's when she would say, should we tell them? Of course, the family was confused. And so when Anna and Derrick would type out they were in love, they were so confused. And then Anna would walk over to Derrick and kiss Derrick. And the family is just like, what is going on? So for the past 2 years, Anna claimed that she was getting closer and closer to Derrick and that he began to seduce her and that they were just getting closer and that they eventually fell in love. She shared how there was this time where Derrick would go to these classes and people would ask questions and then he would type it out with Anna. And someone had asked a question if Derrick ever wanted a relationship. And Derrick had apparently typed out, I want that more than anything, but that doesn't happen for people with disabilities like mine. And then he just looked at Anna and she was like, I just knew that he was telling me with his eyes that he loved me. Sure, sure. She would say that kissing Derrick was really hard, which, yeah, no shit. He cannot kiss. Girl, what? So if that wasn't bad enough, she would then say to the family, Derrick and I have been intimate. We've been having sex. When in reality, she raped him. Derrick wasn't able to communicate. But to Anna, she was like, no, like, we've been having sex and it's consensual and we're gonna move out together, by the way. And this just made John and Daisy just like, what the, what are you talking about? And so John remembered a time when he was changing Derrick's diaper and he noticed that there had been bruises on Derrick's lower back, almost like a carpet burn, as if he had been dragged. And he had called the school being like, hey, what happened to Derrick? Did someone push him? Did he fall? And the school was like, we have no idea what you're talking about. There was no reports of it. That's when John realized now that it was because Derrick had been getting raped by Anna. So of course the family is just confused. They're angry, they're hurt. They probably feel betrayed because what the hell do you mean that you've been having sex with him? Like, we trusted you to help him communicate, not have a relationship with him. So I guess Anna would go home that day thinking things were fine, but obviously they weren't. It took a lot for the family to not react. I believe that John kind of left because he said he was so angry. And the next morning at like 10 in the morning, Anna gets a call from John, and John's like, hey, I don't want you to see my brother until you talk with my mom and me. And they would schedule time to meet up, but they kept backing out because Anna started to get really weird. She was like harassing them, calling them. She was trying to contact Derrick, and they were like, okay, stop. And so they would stop returning her calls. I think at first they weren't really planning on taking a lot of legal action, but then Anna would go really far where she would email the director of Derrick's day program, where she said things like Daisy and John are not letting me speak to Derrick and they don't know what's best for Derrick. What's really crazy about this entire thing is in this documentary, she would go on to say how she told Derrick that they couldn't deny him of wanting a relationship because that would infringe on his rights, which is crazy. So it was like Anna was actually trying to have the Johnsons lose their rights or their guardianship over Derrick. And this obviously angered them. So John would actually go and make an appointment with the dean, and he would go into her office and he starts telling her everything that had been happening. And the dean was confused and shocked. And not because she's like, why are you telling me this? But in a way of like, what the hell is she doing? And that's when John said he would actually start to break down and cry. And in the documentary, he said he didn't really want to do that in front of a white woman, but he just couldn't stop it from coming out. It most likely was probably because Derrick probably was holding it in for so long. And sometimes you say something and then it just comes out all at once. And that's probably what happened to John. John loves his brother. He was protective of him. And, maybe he felt like he didn't protect him enough or what, when in reality, it wasn't anyone's fault. It was just Anna's fault. And I just think, like, for John, like, he probably just finally said it out loud and it just all collapsed. And so that's when the dean was like to John, you need to lawyer up and get the police involved because this is crazy. One of the sad things is Derrick would actually begin to self harm a lot. He was biting his hands a lot more. He was hitting himself. And so that's when Daisy would call Anna and be like, hey, like, I just want to know what actually was going on between you and Derrick. What Anna didn't know at the time was that this call was being monitored by the police. And during this call, Anna would admit everything about how they had been having sex, and she didn't see anything wrong with what she did. What's crazy is in the documentary, Anna does try to make herself out to be the victim, when it's like, girl, you are not the victim in this case. So after this call, Anna would be in the parking lot of the university where there would be these two men in just like normal clothes, and they would kind of come up to her and they would ask her if she knew who Derrick Johnson is. And she was like, yeah, I know him. And they would start to question her a little bit. She would later realize that they were detectives and she would tell them everything because she's like, I don't have to lie. Like, this is consensual. She didn't think she did anything wrong. She just would confess to everything. She was later fired, thankfully. And actually, she wasn't allowed on the campus, which she was shocked by, which I think is hilarious. And her husband would actually find out what had been happening and he would actually divorce her, thankfully, because the police actually went to her home. I think they had a warrant to go through her stuff. And he probably was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's so crazy. I can't imagine being the husband in that scenario.
Yeah, didn't she have kids as well? Like, that's so freaking wild for her to be like, "Yeah, me and Derek, we're gonna move out, but, like, I still have my, like, whole family, and that's fine. They're chill with it," or, like, whatever. That's so weird.
Yeah, it's so crazy, and she doesn't see anything wrong with it. Like, she thinks it's just, "Oh, I fell in love with somebody." When it's like, "No, you fell in love with yourself. You were writing those messages. He was not. He can't consent." And so, actually, before the trial, Derek would be first evaluated by Dr. Shane because the Special Victims Unit of New Jersey was wanting to see Derek's level of communication to see if he could actually consent. So Shane would sit down with Derek. He would introduce Derek to a bunch of photos to see if Derek could understand what he was looking at, but Derek was struggling a lot. He wasn't really able to understand. Like, if you showed him a picture of a cat, he wasn't able to be like, that's a cat. he would actually give Derrick objects. Now, Derrick was able to pick up the objects, but he wasn't like picking up an object because he knew what it was. Because Dr. Shane would be like, pick up the spoon, but he wouldn't pick up the spoon because he didn't really know what a spoon was. Shane would also interview Daisy, and that's where Daisy would say things like, Derrick's communication is very low, but he does have a way of communicating. He will scoot to the fridge on a chair if he's really hungry, he'll tap it, or he will dance, or he'll smile, or he might bite his fingers if he's anxious. So even if he is unable to communicate, he is still able to communicate in his own way. Kind of like a toddler. A toddler might not be able to tell you that they're hungry, but there will be signs. So, they were able to prove, like, yeah, Derrick cannot consent. He does have the mental capacity of a toddler, like the first doctor said. So this trial would be 3 weeks long in 2013. And in court, Anna would literally try to say that Derrick seduced her and that she basically started to victim blame Derrick by saying how he would type out things, that he was initiating all of this. She would share about how they had sex, which I'm not going to get into. There's just no way Derrick was the one initiating it. And even if Derrick was, let's say, hypothetically touching Anna, he isn't touching her in the way of like initiating it. It's like he's mentally disabled. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's crazy that she even tried to use this as a defense. So during this, Derrick would be brought to the court with Daisy helping him walk, just so the jury could see how Derrick looked. So Anna was like mad about this because she was like, oh my God, they're making him look more disabled. Girl, he is disabled. That's why he looks disabled. Because he is. Like, what are you trying to say? So Daisy was so mad and hurt. And in the documentary, this was really sad because she was like on the verge of tears because Anna's attorney was making Daisy out to be the villain and saying things like, how do you feel about her being his lover? And Daisy was like, she's not his lover. Daisy almost lost it in court because she's like, she raped my son. I had to fight for my son to get the help he needed when he was a baby. And now this woman's going to try and rape my son, and you guys are going to try and say it's okay. And I just can't imagine being a mom in that scenario. It's just so heartbreaking. And so Anna would first plead not guilty. She claimed that she used FC to communicate with Derrick, but the prosecutors were able to shut down that claim, basically saying that he isn't able to consent. Her next tactic was to say that the family was trying to hold him back from living his life. Of course, the jury would find Anna guilty of 2 counts of first-degree aggravated sexual assault, which is equivalent to rape in New Jersey. Once she was convicted, the judge didn't allow her to have bail. He claimed that she was a flight risk and she would be sentenced to 12 years and have to register as a sex offender. In 2016, the family was awarded $4 million in a civil lawsuit against Anna, but in 2017, she literally reapplies for an appeal and she was granted a retrial because she said her rights were violated because she wasn't able to use FC as a defense. So she would have another trial, and in 2018, she would plead guilty to third-degree aggravated sexual contact, and she was sentenced to time served. So she only got like 4 or 5 years in jail. She didn't serve the full 12, and she's fucking out now, like just living her life. And she, to this day, thinks she didn't do anything wrong. And it makes me so angry. I get so livid, like, oh my God. Her husband during court would say that she is a pathological liar and a narcissist, and that she doesn't think she did anything wrong. I do want to share a little snippet of what John said at the trial because I believe this really shows the impact of what Anna did to the Johnsons and the love he has for his brother.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
34 years ago, doctors said my brother would not live to see his 3rd birthday. Those doctors and the devil are liars. My brother since then has grown to become a loving person. He is a beautiful brother, and he is a beautiful son. I don't think Anna understood the depth of pain she caused my family. She tried to lay claim to him and rename him. She tried to supplant Derrick's life, a life steeped
Take your time. Take your time.
a life steeped in the history and culture of his God-fearing, Southern-rooted African-American family. She tried to supplant that with some version of life she thought was better. We need to disenchant ourselves from the notion that Anna Stubblefield is some tragic she-ro. Anna is not Sandra Bullock, and this is not The Blind Side. Derrick is not some poor black kid from the ghetto that needs someone to save him. An able-bodied woman raped a disabled young man that could not consent to sex. You were wrong, Anna. You committed a crime. There is no gray area.
So even though the family did get some justice, they got some money, Anna is registered as a sex offender. Daisy would go on to share about how Derrick has shown a lot of signs of sexual abuse, and she had to put Derrick on medication because he began to masturbate, which is very common for people who have been sexually abused. John would go on to say, you know what, it's fine that he's disabled. He can't do other things that other people can do, but that's fine. Daisy would go on to say that, you know what, he's still going to be my child no matter what or how strong he gets. He is still my child. He'll always have that younger mindset. And, he's 40 years old and that's where we are. I don't love him no less and I don't love him no more. He's my baby. Honestly, the idea that Anna didn't see what she did is wrong is just so shocking to me. And I just can't imagine being this far gone from reality that she doesn't think she did anything wrong. It's just, honestly, it's so crazy. And honestly, I'm curious to know what everyone else's thoughts are on this case and what you guys think of. But of course, if you are wanting to know a more detailed version of what happened, I suggest watching the documentary that's on Netflix. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Again, we meant no harm to anyone who has been affected by this case. I hope I explained this with as much information and empathy as I could, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.